All right, let's dive into a story where this incredible scientific wonder, just slammed right into pure corporate greed. It's all about a so-called miracle element that was supposed to promise this glowing, bright future, but, well, it delivered a horrifying secret instead. This is the story of the Radium Girls.
And that line, that's not from some horror movie. No way. That is a real medical account from back in the 1920s. It's describing one of the last days of a young woman's life. A woman who was, and I mean this literally, just falling apart from the inside out, while she was still alive.
So that's the big question, right? How on earth did this miracle substance, radium, something that was celebrated for its magical glow and even its supposed healing powers, how did it become the source of just unimaginable pain? To figure that out, we've got to go back to the beginning. Okay, so to really understand just how big this tragedy was, we need to look at one of the very first victims. Her story, it just lays bare the horror that was about to unfold for so many others.
This is Molly Maggia. She was just 25, a perfectly healthy dial painter working for the United States Radium Corporation. For her, it all started with a simple toothache back in 1922. But when the tooth was pulled, the socket it wouldn't heal. It became this awful, festering ulcer. And then her entire jaw started to disintegrate. It all ended with a massive hemorrhage that killed her. But here's the really awful part, the part that shows you what they were up against. To cover their tracks, the company actually had doctors lie and list her official cause of death as syphilis.
So you have to ask, how did this even happen? Well, to get it, you have to look at the job itself. The job these women were hired for, a job that, for them, was supposed to be the opportunity of a lifetime.
You have to remember, in the early 1900s, the world was just obsessed with radium. It was the new wonder element. Its ability to glow in the dark felt like actual magic. And so they put it in everything. I mean everything. Glowing watch dials for the military, sure, but also cosmetic creams, and get this, even health tonics that people would literally drink, thinking it was good for them.
So for young, working-class women at the time, getting a job painting these watch dials, that was a dream job. It was seen as this clean, artistic, almost elite kind of work. And the pay? It was incredible, more than 3 times the average factory wage. It was a huge step up. Okay, so to paint those tiny, tiny numbers on the watches, they were taught this one very specific, and as it turns out, very fatal technique. See, they needed a super fine point on their little camel hair brushes. So what did the supervisors tell them to do? Use their mouths. It was called lip pointing. Dip the brush in the paint, bring it to your lips to make a point, and then paint. Dip, lip, point, paint. Over and over and over again, hundreds of times a day. And with every single one of those motions, they were swallowing a tiny bit of radioactive poison.
And if you want to know just how safe they thought this stuff was, get this. The radium dust would get all over their hair and their clothes, so when they left work, they would literally glow in the dark. They got the nickname the Ghost Girls, and they thought it was amazing. They'd even wear their best dresses to the factory so they'd shimmer and glow when they went out dancing that night. Some of them would even playfully paint their teeth and their nails with the stuff for fun. They had absolutely no idea they were covering themselves in poison.
So what was this radium actually doing once it got inside their bodies? Well, the science here is it's both really fascinating and absolutely horrifying.
So here's the thing. Chemically, radium looks a whole lot like calcium. And our bodies love calcium, right? They need it for our bones. So when these women swallowed the radium, their bodies were basically tricked. Their metabolism couldn't tell the difference. It saw the radium and thought, hey, calcium, we need this. And it sent this radioactive poison straight into their bones, locking it into the very structure of their skeleton.
Now, the body managed to get rid of about 80% of the radium they ingested, but that last 20%, that was the killer. It settled deep into their bone tissue, and once it was there for good. There was no getting it out. It just sat there, constantly blasting out radiation day and night for the rest of their lives.
And as constant internal radiation, it was just catastrophic. The alpha particles coming off the radium were like these microscopic cannons firing off inside their bones, just shredding their DNA and killing tissue. It would cut off the blood supply, causing the bone itself to literally die. That's a condition called necrosis. It wiped out their bone marrow, which led to horrible anemia, and it basically riddled their skeletons with holes, creating what doctors called honeycombed bones. And this is what led to that infamous, horrifying condition, radium jaw.
But the most shocking part of this whole story isn't just the awful science of it. It's the fact that the company, they knew this stuff was dangerous, and they deliberately, actively lied to these women. I mean, the hypocrisy here is just staggering. Think about this. While the young women on the factory floor are being told the paint is so safe they could eat it, the company's chemists and managers are handling the very same stuff using lead screens, long tongs, and protective masks. The company had already published scientific papers on the injurious effects of radium, but to the girls, nope, totally harmless.
And get this, in 1924, U.S. Radium actually hired a Harvard physician, a guy named Cecil Drinker, to investigate what was going on. His report was absolutely damning. It confirmed a direct, undeniable link between the paint and all the illnesses. So what do you think the company did with this information? They buried it. They didn't just bury it, they actually created a fake, falsified version of the report and gave that to the government, a version that claimed the complete opposite of what the doctor had found.
But these women, they refused to be silenced. Even though they were literally dying, they decided to fight back. And that decision led to one of the most important legal battles in the history of American workers' rights.
The newspapers at the time gave them this haunting name, the Living Dead. And it was tragically accurate. By the time their case finally made it to court in 1928, the women were so weak, their bones so brittle, that they couldn't even raise their own arms to take the oath. In fact, 2 of them were completely bedridden and had to be carried in.
With all that public pressure mounting, the company finally caved and settled. Each of the women got a lump sum of $10,000, which, to give you some perspective, is around $183,000 today. They also got a small pension every year. And sure, it was a huge moral victory, but for most of them, that money came way, way too late. The majority of them were dead within just a couple of years of that settlement.
But the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It actually took another decade of legal battles. A whole other group of women in Illinois, led by a woman named Catherine Donahue, had to fight their own case. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and in 1939, they finally won. And that victory, that set a legal precedent that no one could ignore ever again.
So the story of the Radium Girls is obviously a massive tragedy. But their suffering, it wasn't for nothing. Their fight left behind this incredible legacy that is still protecting people, right now, today.
Okay, so from a scientific standpoint, their bodies became this tragic but absolutely invaluable source of data. By studying the women who survived, scientists were able to set the first ever safety limits for how much radiation a human body can take. And think about the impact of that for a second. The safety rules for the Manhattan Project, the project that built the atomic bomb, were based directly on what they learned from the Radium Girls. They probably saved thousands of lives. But maybe their single greatest legacy is this. Their legal battle established the right for individual workers to sue their employers for getting sick on the job. That basic right, which we kind of take for granted now, came from them. And that principle led directly to the creation of OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the government agency that protects millions of American workers every single day.
So in the end, that glow that once seemed so beautiful and magical, it became a permanent radioactive warning sign. Even now, almost a century later, the bones of the Radium Girls are still radioactive. You can still get a reading off a Geiger counter held over their graves. They remain this haunting, physical reminder of the true cost of progress when it's not paired with protection, and the terrible price these women paid for a simple glow.